After directing the moderately successful Avengers Endgame, the Russo brothers have decided to direct a smaller film called Cherry, starring Tom Holland. So let's talk about it. Cherry tells the story of a war veteran who takes up robbing banks to fund his heroin addiction. The film is based off the book Cherry by Nico Walker, which was semi-autobiographical. Now for me, this was one of my most anticipated films of the year because I am such a big fan of the MCU and the work of the Russos inside of the MCU. I wanted to see what they would do next. I wanted to see what else they could do, tackling a totally different genre. And naturally, when you put Tom Holland in the lead, I want to see what he can do outside of just playing Peter Parker. So it had my attention. But before I tell you what I thought about it, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Let me know your excitement level for this film and what you're expecting to get out of it. I was lucky enough to get to see it early. It comes out in theaters this Friday, and then it will debut on Apple TV Plus in just a couple of weeks. With that said, let's get started with our review. And the word that immediately comes to mind when I think of this film is uneven. On the one hand, there's a tremendous amount of talent going on behind and in front of the camera. You get to see Tom Holland really show his full potential as an actor as you watch this guy absolutely descend into this life of depravity. And whether it's through the PTSD, the drug addiction, the tragedy of it, he gets to show you what he can do. Likewise, there's sequences throughout the entire film where you know that you're watching these top-level directors that know how to handle big, gigantic sequences and pull them all together. But at the same time, the movie feels like a gigantic pendulum swing for both the Russos as well as Tom Holland. Both of them are so famous for working for Mickey Mouse and putting out Marvel movies that this feels like them trying really, really hard to shake off that family-friendly vibe that comes with working for Disney and putting out MCU films. The film is bleak, it is dark, and it just feels at times like it's trying to shock the audience with just how far it goes in showing the tragedy of this lead character's life. Right out of the gate, when you see him as kind of an awkward young person, it's uncomfortable seeing Tom Holland while wearing glasses, being awkward, talking about all the girls he wants to bang, dropping F-bombs left and right, because he feels so much like Peter Parker at that time, and we're not used to seeing Peter Parker talking like this or talking about girls in this manner. And as the movie goes along and as you get into the war sequences, you're able to shake off the Peter Parker and see this character instead. But there is a long transition period before you can actually just to not see Peter Parker in this movie. And that's what makes this film so tricky. As I said earlier, Tom Holland gives a great performance, but at the same time, his background, our baggage that we carry into the film that he carries into it, it's tough to separate the actor from his previous roles and kind of that typecasting that can happen with certain people. And because at the beginning he's playing an awkward college student that wears glasses, there's a lot of Peter Parker in there. Likewise, as I mentioned before, the Russos are great at certain sequences in this film, especially when you get off to the war. They're the opening time when we first get to a battle. It's an awesome shot that it takes a talented director or pair of directors to pull off a shot like that. But a lot of other stuff in the film feels like them trying to show us how creative and artistic they are as directors. And all these creative flourishes are more of a distraction than a natural way to communicate and tell this story. As a case in point, certain points in time throughout the film, Tom Holland's character will talk directly to the camera, But they do this just the wrong amounts. If it was just used as a framing device, setting up and closing out the story with the way the story is told, you could do that. That might have worked. Or if it was used all throughout the entire film, maybe that would have worked. But instead, it's used as the framing device and then very randomly sprinkled in the middle, just enough that it's a distraction rather than helping to communicate the story. But when they focus in on just telling this story and not trying to impress us with all the artistic flourishes, at times it can be a very engaging story as you watch this character just descend through the tragedy of events that take place in his life that set him on this path to all these crazy, insane things happening. It can be very engaging, and you want to see what's going to happen next and how they're kind of going to get out of these certain situations, all of which makes for a film that's uneven. There's no shortage of elements inside of this film that are great when it comes to the writing, the acting, and the directing. And at the same time, there's no shortage of odd choices when it comes to the writing and directing and the casting of Tom Holland. But at its core, there's this side to it that just feels like they're trying too hard to impress us. But the Russos are the directors of Endgame. They don't need to try to impress us. They've already won at the game of directing. And so the project just feels like a very odd follow-up to Endgame. And it raises the question, like, why did you choose this film? What drew you to it besides just trying to do the polar opposite of what you've been doing for the last decade? Because even as you go throughout the story, and parts of it are engaging, parts of it are very fascinating, but it doesn't have a lot to say about any of it. It's not making a comment on war. It's not making any commentary on the financial situation that was taking place at the time the movie takes place. And it's not really tackling the opioid epidemic in a way that it's coming to a point. So you just have these two directors that directed the biggest movie of all time and decided to follow it up with a very dark, bleak film that feels a little bit like if you combined Requiem for a Dream with Baby Driver. That's what this movie felt like to me. When the movie just tells its story, it works well enough, but it's far too bogged down by stylistic flourishes and this general sense that they're trying to prove something to the audience. So unfortunately, while I went into the year very much anticipating this film, I'm pretty mixed on it. Overall, I'll give this one a C+ on the entertainment scale. It's a 5.5 out of 10. If you really like tragic drug dramas and already have the service, sure, check it out. Otherwise, you can probably sit this one out. Once you see it, be sure to let me know what you thought down below in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.